Shell-Shocked takes us into a community in crisis, looking at the impact of violence, especially on young people. To help us understand this, we have journalist Carla Murphy here in studio, who has written and spoken powerfully on crime, victims, and why so many young Black men are being murdered. Carla, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
Talk to me about the psychological impact of violence on the community.
It breaks the bonds of the community, right? One of the most powerful things I thought about this film was that it actually showed that instead of just focusing on the incident of the violence itself, so instead of just focusing on the body in the street, there were images of that. It also focuses on the impact of that. Mm-hmm. So it gets into, well, a week after, a month after, a year after, 3 years after, where are these people? Where are the bystanders to the violence?
And it becomes a part of the culture there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about why that violence exists. One of the points in the film, we see how guns are cheaply available in New Orleans.
I mean, I think that's just the first thing to look at, is how easy it is to get a gun. And as one gentleman said, when you also think of the resale and the informal market, so not just buying a gun legally, but then also you have all these guns circulating within the area as well.
Beyond guns, what are some of the pieces that, so that we can put that together?
Unacknowledged trauma, right? So people, the walking wounded, so people who are walking around and their trauma is not even acknowledged. It's not even acknowledged that they have been a victim of something. There are small studies being done around young Black men in particular, and they don't even see themselves as victims, right? Mm-hmm. So you can ask them a question, have you ever been a victim of a violent crime? And 9 out of 10 will say no. Then you ask something like, well, have you ever been robbed, mugged, beaten? And like the same 9 out of 10 will say yes.
So they don't even see those violent events as something that would victimize them or traumatize them?
I don't think they want to identify as a victim, whatever it means to be a victim in their particular cultural setting. And I think I can understand that. If you live in a place where there is a lot of violence, having a reputation for being a victim is not really going to help you out in your neighborhood, right? You have to be kind of tough.
Right,
so
absolutely.
You're not going to embrace anything where you see yourself as a victim. The other thing, too, is that we're focusing so much on homicide victims, but you also have to look at the people who survive gun violence. Mm-hmm. According to the CDC, for every one gunshot homicide, there are 6 non-fatal shootings by assault.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? So look at those numbers, and are we really clear on what happens to these people after they've been shot and then they go home and they're recuperating? Mm-hmm. It doesn't just affect the person, it affects their family as well.
We've seen solutions to curb crime across the country. A new idea is called restorative justice. Tell me what that means and how you think it could be applied here.
The basic part of the theory is there's this sense of dedication to repairing the harm and also acknowledging that harm is not just something that the victim experiences, but also something that the criminal, the perpetrator, is something that they experience. And then coming out not just from the individual, but also looking at their families as well. A lot of the times we miss the fact that these people are connected to families and they're connected to communities. But even if you just keep it as families, I mean, the children growing up in a household where they've lost someone to violence, and sometimes they've lost more than one person to violence. So how does that child then go to school? How does that child learn? And then consider that in one classroom, say a classroom of 35 kids, you have about 27 who have that experience. I think restorative justice is a way to start looking at those, the collateral damage, which I think this film starts to address.